In 1536, the most powerful man in the world personally strangled his closest friend with a silk bowstring, and his wife may have whispered the order into his ear. How does a kidnapped teenage girl from a small Ukrainian village become powerful enough to orchestrate the death of the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire? How does a slave transform into the only woman an emperor would ever legally marry? And what dark secrets did she carry to her grave in 1588? This is the story of Hürrem Sultan, and nothing about it is what you think. Picture a spring morning in 1520. Somewhere in the Crimean steppe, a caravan of captured slaves trudges toward the Black Sea ports. Among them walks a girl, perhaps 15 years old. Her name is Alexandra Lisovska, though some sources call her Anastasia. She is the daughter of an Orthodox priest from the town of Rohatyn in what is now western Ukraine. Her red hair catches the sunlight. Her world has just ended. Crimean Tatar raiders have torn her from everything she knows. Her family is likely dead or scattered. She will never see her homeland again. Within weeks, she will be sold in the slave markets of Kaffa, then shipped to Constantinople. She has no way of knowing that within a decade, ambassadors will bow before her, that her name will be spoken in fear from Vienna to Venice, that she will reshape an empire. The Istanbul she arrives in is the center of the known world. Süleiman has just become sultan at the age of 25, inheriting the wealthiest and most militarily powerful state on earth. The Topkapi Palace alone employs over 4,000 servants. The Imperial harem, where Alexandra will live, operates like a shadow government with its own hierarchy, economy, and brutal politics. Here is something most people don't realize about Ottoman harems. They were not simply collections of women waiting for a sultan's attention. They were intensely competitive institutions, more similar to a cutthroat corporate environment than a gilded prison. Every woman had a rank. Every rank could be lost. Only one concubine would ever see her son become sultan. The rest would fade into obscurity or worse. Into this world steps our Ukrainian priest's daughter. She is given a new name, Hürrem. It means the cheerful one. And somehow, impossibly, she lives up to it. Contemporary accounts describe her not as the most beautiful woman in the harem, but as something more dangerous. She was witty. She laughed easily. She could hold a conversation. In a world of silent, submissive concubines trained to lower their eyes, Hürrem looked directly at the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and made him smile. Süleiman, we must understand, was not a man who smiled easily. He was brilliant, devout, and melancholic by nature. Western Europeans called him the Magnificent, but his own people called him Kanuni, the lawgiver. He spent hours reading poetry and more hours writing it. He was, in other words, a man who valued his inner world, and Hürrem walked straight into it. Within months of her arrival, she had captured his attention. Within years, something unprecedented happened. Süleiman stopped visiting his other concubines entirely. He wrote her poetry. He called her my springtime, my cheerful-faced one, my daytime, my sweetheart, my laughing leaf. This was not how sultans were supposed to behave, and everyone knew it. The woman who knew it most was Mahidevran Sultan, the mother of Süleiman's eldest son, Prince Mustafa. Under normal circumstances, Mahidevran's position would have been unassailable. Her son was the heir apparent. She was the sultan's recognized favorite. Then Hürrem arrived, and everything changed. Venetian ambassadors reported that the two women came to blows. One account describes Mahidevran beating Hürrem, tearing her hair, scratching her face. When Süleiman summoned Hürrem to his chambers soon after, she refused to come, saying she was too injured and ashamed to appear before him. The gamble paid off. Mahidevran was banished from Constantinople, sent away to a distant province with her son. But Hürrem was not satisfied with simply removing one rival. She did something no concubine had ever done before. In 1533 or 1534, she convinced Süleiman to free her from slavery and marry her legally. Try to understand what this meant. Ottoman sultans did not marry. The last sultan to take a legal wife had been Orhan Gazi nearly 200 years earlier. The dynasty deliberately avoided marriage to prevent the families of brides from gaining political power. For centuries, sultans had children only with slave concubines who had no family connections and no legal claims. Hürrem shattered this tradition completely. She was now not merely a favorite concubine, but the legal wife of the sultan with all the religious and social status that implied. She moved from the old palace to quarters in Topkapi itself, living closer to Süleiman than any woman in Ottoman history. She bore him 6 children, Mehmed, Mirima, Abdullah, Selim, Bayezid, and Cihangir, and then she turned her attention to the most powerful man in the empire after Süleiman himself, Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha. Ibrahim's story is almost as extraordinary as Hürrem's. A Greek slave from Parga, he had been Süleiman's companion since childhood. The Sultan loved him. He promoted him from palace servant to Grand Vizier at the astonishing age of 30. He gave him a palace. He married him to his own sister, Hatice Sultan. But Ibrahim was arrogant. He accumulated too much power and too much gold. Foreign ambassadors reported that he practically ruled the empire while Süleiman focused on his books and his poetry. And critically, Ibrahim was an ally of Mahidevran. He favored her son Mustafa as heir. This meant he was Hürrem's enemy. Did she whisper against him to Süleiman? Did she forge letters, plant evidence, drip poison into her husband's ear night after night? We will never know exactly what happened behind those harem walls. We only know the result. On March 15th, 1536, Ibrahim dined with Süleiman, as he had done thousands of times before. They talked late into the night. Then Ibrahim retired to his chambers in the palace, and sometime before dawn, the Sultan's mutes came for him. His body was found the next morning, strangled with a silk bowstring, bearing the marks of a violent struggle. No explanation was ever given. Süleiman never spoke of Ibrahim again. He forbade anyone to mention the name of his dearest friend. But the result was clear. The single greatest obstacle to Hürrem's sons had been eliminated. The next obstacle would take longer to remove. Prince Mustafa was everything an Ottoman heir should be. He was handsome, capable, popular with the army, and crucially, he was competent. Even foreign observers wrote admiringly of his qualities. He was Süleiman's eldest surviving son and, for most of the empire, the obvious successor. He was also not Hürrem's child. For years, the tension built. Hürrem allegedly supported her own son's claims, particularly Selim and Bayezid. The Janissaries and the Anatolian troops loved Mustafa. The court divided into factions. Everyone waited. Then in 1553, during a campaign against Persia, Süleiman summoned Mustafa to his tent. Rumors had reached the Sultan that Mustafa was plotting rebellion, that he had made contact with the Persian Shah, that he planned to seize the throne. Were the rumors true? Were they fabricated? Did Hürrem plant them through her son-in-law, the Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha? Here is what we know. Mustafa entered his father's tent unarmed. He was immediately seized by the Sultan's mutes. As Süleiman watched from behind a screen, his 38-year-old son was strangled with a silk bowstring. He died fighting, tearing at his father's curtains, trying to reach him for mercy that never came. Süleiman also ordered the execution of Mustafa's young son, eliminating that branch of the dynasty completely. The empire was shocked. The army nearly mutinied. Poets composed laments for the murdered prince that are still remembered today. But it was done. The path to the throne was now clear for Hürrem's sons. She did not live to see the result. Hürrem Sultan died in April 1558, probably from illness, possibly from a chronic ailment she had battled for years. Süleiman was shattered. He built her one of the most magnificent tombs in Istanbul, decorated with Iznik tiles of surpassing beauty. He wrote poetry mourning her. He never took another companion. When he died in 1566, their son Selim became Sultan. The priest's daughter from Rohatyn had placed her child on the throne of the Ottomans. So what are we to make of Hürrem Sultan? Was she a ruthless manipulator who destroyed lives without remorse? Her enemies certainly thought so. They called her a witch who had bewitched the Sultan. They blamed her for every misfortune of the reign. Or was she simply a woman of extraordinary ability, forced to use the only tools available to her in a world where she had no rights and no protection? In an empire where she could have been forgotten, discarded, or killed, she instead became indispensable. Consider this. Hürrem was also a major philanthropist. She built mosques, soup kitchens, hospitals, and fountains across the empire, from Mecca to Jerusalem to Constantinople. The Haseki Sultan complex in Istanbul provided free food to the poor every day. Her endowments helped thousands of people she would never meet. Was this charity or reputation laundering? Genuine piety or political calculation? Perhaps it was all of these things at once. People are rarely simple, and powerful people almost never are. Here is what we know for certain. A girl was stolen from her home, sold into slavery, and forced into a world of absolute powerlessness. Through intelligence, charm, and quite possibly through murder, she rose to become one of the most influential women in Ottoman history. She changed the rules of an empire and placed her bloodline on the throne. Was Hürrem Sultan a villain or a survivor? A schemer or a strategist? A monster or a mother who did what she had to do? I want to hear what you think. Tell me in the comments. If you had been in Hürrem's position, what would you have done?